that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's have a look. Bear with. Let's see. Show all windows. I've got 17 million tabs open, so please bear with me.
Classic.
That's agency life.
It really is.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I first just want to thank you, Isabella, for inviting me and Lydia to do this today. It's really exciting to be here and talk to you all. I know that there's not many of us, but that's great. We love a real tight niche group. And so we're going to be trying to answer all of your questions today. So if you do have any questions, just let us know. Either raise your hand or just kind of wave wildly. We can see you on the side there. And just let us know and we'll be happy to help you out. So today we're going to be talking about starting out in a communications job, a world of modern media, purpose, and shaping brand perception. So first, a little bit about us. I think that might help. So if you don't know who we are, my name is Danielle Hilaire. I'm a digital consumer consultant at Lansons Communications, which is a 31-year-old in-house agency, and we'll explain a bit more about what that means later on. But I'm a senior account exec and I'm a specialist in campaign creation towards consumers especially, and developing social and digital content strategy. And then I also do a lot of work in the crisis space, especially with some of my clients. And I deal with kind of a lot of stuff around race and around decolonialism and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, really exciting. And our CEO Tony has joined, which makes things a little bit more intense, but it's great. Tony actually works with me on some of that stuff, which is great. And then I also am co-founder and secretary of the Lansons Diversity Group as well, which is something that we've started to kind of really push the agency on a lot of really, really important topics. And so that's really exciting bit of work that I'm working on. And now over to Lydia.
Yeah, so my name's Lydia. I'm a corporate consultant at Lansons, and I also do a bit of new business for Lansons as well. I basically work across corporate, consumer, and crisis campaigns across a range of financial and technology clients. I sort of got here through a bit of a mismatch of doing a politics degree, and then I went into a new business agency, and I've basically managed to forge my two great passions of sort of talking and communicating with my interest for current affairs. And so, yeah, that's a bit about me.
Awesome. And so what we have here is a quote. I don't know if you guys can see the quote. No, you have to move this thing. And it says, reputation is the sum of what your key audiences think of you and feel about you. And so the reason why we're talking about reputation is because Lansons is a reputation management consultancy. And essentially what that means is that when we're thinking about comms and we're thinking about PR, we like to look at it really holistically. We're not just thinking about media relationships. We're thinking about, you know, how is your brand viewed by society in terms of, you know, from the corporate board downwards, all the way downwards. And so what we do is we try to take a really holistic approach, and we look at marketing, and we look at comms, and we look at content, and we look at media relations and public affairs and all these different things to try and make sure that when we're thinking about a brand and we're thinking about how you're viewed, that every kind of topic is covered. I know Lydia's got, I think you had a great quote earlier today about what that split into. I can't remember it now. I'm not going to try and say it.
No, I mean, reputation is basically interchangeable with sort of respect, trust, brand, and image. They all mean the same thing, and they all tick all of these boxes. But hopefully by the end of this seminar, you'll learn that you can't have reputation without communication, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So yeah,
sure. Great. Around again. Oh, let's put it down here. So what we're going to do firstly is give you a short introduction into the world of communications. Like, what is it? What does it look like? Because it can seem quite daunting from the outside. So we kind of want to kind of just ease you guys into it. And so first of all, what we're going to do is talk about communications broadly, and because there's so many different types, so we want to make sure that you understand a little bit about, you know, what are the different kinds, what does that entail, what would you be kind of interested in, because there's so many agencies, millions of agencies across the globe, and some of them have very, very specific things that they specialize in. So for Lansons, it's corporate comms, but we also do consumer and a bunch of other stuff. And so we've got 5 here that we're kind of just going to quickly outline between me and Lydia. And just if you have any questions, by the way, feel free to kind of jump in at any point. If anything, just if we're going too fast or whatever, just let us know and we'll kind of slow down. So do you want to go ahead with the first one, Lydia?
Yes. So corporate communications is when businesses talk about business to business, B2B. A lot of it is communicating with senior management, sort of corporate positioning. A lot of the sort of work that our company does is financial communications. So that's working within the financial services sector, campaigning, as well as speaking to stakeholders and communicating sort of M&A and when companies go to IPO. So that's really sort of a lot of what corporate campaigns look like. A lot of the work that I do is very much in this space, and keeping on top of current affairs as well. Danielle, if you want to go through consumer.
So consumer and digital communications, and when we're talking about this, we might use terms like B2B and B2C. So with corporate comms, it's B2B, business to business communications, whereas consumer, it's business to a consumer, so B2C. And essentially what we do is we try and create these wonderful campaigns that are kind of really, really specified and targeted towards our specific consumer. Every single brand on the planet has a very specific audience, and that, you know, and there's demographics that are kind of split into that in terms of age, race, whatever, the amount of money they make, you know, how educated they are, all of that stuff, and that will kind of change how you need to target them and the kind of campaigns that you'll create. So we have to do a lot of research beforehand in terms of, you know, looking at the brand, looking at the actual consumer demographic, what makes up that particular demographic, and then figuring out, okay, so what does this specific audience care about in society? What are the main issues that affect them? How can we help? How does our product or service help them with that? And so that's what we're looking at when we're looking at consumer comms. It's obviously very high impact in terms of media relations. We're looking at a lot of insights. It's a lot of planning, a lot of events. Most of it is idea generation. I say this all the time. About 40% of my job is idea generation, which is amazing, but can be quite draining at times. And I think over the last year, especially with the pandemic, we do a lot of planning in like the later part of the year. And so when the pandemic came along, we had to kind of throw out so much planning and basically just start from scratch, which was amazing and terrifying at the same time. So, you know, you have to be very adaptable when you're a consultant, especially working in an in-house agency. And then obviously we've got content marketing, it's a lot of evaluation and management. And then we do workshops, we do creative training and all that kind of really fun stuff. Lydia, do you want to go on and talk about public affairs?
Yeah, so public affairs is a little bit different to the other two. It's the sort of audience again is different. It's about communicating with sort of stakeholders. So be it members of parliament, senior sort of CEOs, leaders of businesses, people that can influence policy really. And I think a large part of public affairs is being very on top of what's going on with the government, what the government is saying, what the opposition is saying, what's going on again in the news. It's a lot of political PR, it's a lot of workshops, it's a lot of roundtables, and just making sure that any crises are being sort of kept under wraps and basically communicating with people that have have power. One thing that our company does do is go to the Conservative Party conference as well, and use it as a really good opportunity to sort of network and speak to the sort of people that have political power and legislative power. So it's a really interesting point of work, and if any of you guys do sort of political degrees, it could be a sort of job for you.
Absolutely. And then the next one that we're looking at is change and employee engagement. Now, one part of comms that I think doesn't necessarily get as much shine as the others is internal comms. And so essentially that talks about the communications between a board and then all of their employees. And when this is super important is when a company or a brand is going through a big change. So for instance, especially with a thing like a pandemic, that's obviously going to change things in terms of there's a lot of restructuring, if there's layoffs, if they're doing a new brand or a rebrand. This is a project of such considerable size and impact that there has to be internal comms that have to be considered. And so what we'll do is we'll strategically consult with them and put together a plan. It's a lot about corporate storytelling, figuring out, what's the story that we're trying to tell our employees, how do we get them on board with our project, how do we get them on the same page as us, in terms of leadership communications, if we've got spokespeople, how do we get them on board with that? Is it do we have to media train them again? It's about employer branding, it's about research and doing audits and surveys, so many surveys, making sure that you have like a dialogue between yourself, the company, and the employees to find out what are they worried about, or what do they want to see as a result of the project. It's really important to get them on brand from an early stage and not just tell them the things that are going to happen, because that's when people kind of get detached and kind of scared or anxious about change. And so it's a really important part of comms that we also specialize in. We do a lot of stuff in terms of the mind, and we do a lot of stuff about psychocomms and stuff like that, thinking about the way that your brain works and how do we kind of use that to kind of influence our strategy, which is a really cool piece of work that we do. And we actually put a book out. I think we published a book about it as well, which is pretty cool. And then finally, we're going to talk about branded content and broadcast. And so this is again something that we're really hot on. And within Lansons, we actually have a production team that pulls together a lot of really exciting content that we do. So even within the building, we have a studio, and we use it to kind of we record podcasts in there, we do media training, we have cameras which we can set up, and we can bring people in and do like fake interviews and stuff like that, or we can do real ones. We can do webcasts, podcasts, all that kind of stuff, vlogger engagement, influencers, all of that kind of stuff. We create videos, we do amazing video work, and we've done so much of it throughout the pandemic. Like, it's been so profitable for us, but also in the terms that so many brands, they're struggling to keep up and to make sure that they have the same impact that they had pre-pandemic, with all the noise that comes up with something like this in the news cycle. And so that kind of content is really super important, and we've seen a lot of brands that have invested a lot of money into this sphere, and so it's great. And I realized that crisis comms isn't on here, so I can quickly cover that. We can split between us. And so crisis comms is essentially, it's a very delicate piece of work, and essentially when something goes wrong, for instance, when someone gets dragged on social media, or there's a story that comes out, and we monitor that situation and we'll advise them, and we'll get some of our senior staff to think about a strategy that we can kind of implement, and it's a lot of kind of making sure that we review the situation, challenge the business, challenge them on what they can do to make things right, the commitments that they can kind of make. And that's a piece of really exciting work. When you get pulled into a crisis team, it's so fun. I mean, not fun for them, but fun for us. And so I think that we've covered all of them. So let's move on to the next section. And so we're going to talk about Lansons and who we are. And so as we've mentioned, Lansons is a 31-year-old agency. It was founded by a lady called Claire Parsons and her husband, Tony Langham. And Lansons is actually like an amalgamation of their names. It's also a name for champagne as well, which is quite fun. So we get to send that out. And we are a corporate agency, in-house agency, which means that we work with PR teams within certain brands. So there's obviously two different types of comms on two different sides. There's agencies which work with a number of different clients. And then if you're in-house, then you work for a brand, but you do PR specifically for them. So we're an agency. And so we champion gender equality. We always publish our gender pay gap, and we have a really small, low gender pay gap, which is something that's really, really great about us. We care about our carbon footprint. We've been carbon neutral for 11 years. We've been voted as a great place to work. We do yearly surveys, and we win awards. We always play our role in society. We're really great on donating our profits to charity. We've got award-winning partnerships, such as that with High Tide, which is a theatre festival company, which is the reason why I firstly joined, because I was super into drama. And we're committed to diversity, fairness, and inclusion. As I said, I'm a co-founder of the Lansons Diversity Group, which is really trying to push and make sure that, as an agency internally, we're thinking about how we can be better in terms of inclusion, but also pushing our clients to make good decisions as well. And we also believe in creating opportunities. We partner with the Social Mobility Foundation and Drive Forward, which works with people who've been in the care system as well. So that's something that's really, really great. We care about ethics, and also we own our own business. It's we owned by a third of our people, which is, I think, something that's really, really great as well. So you can tell that we care about it because we own it. Lydia, do you want to go on to what we do?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about what we do in terms of our specialisms, but in terms of what we do, what it looks like, we have about 120 clients. We have been nominated for lots of different awards to really sort of reflect the fact that we care about our clients and our employees. We've been ranked the most rated agency many, many times, and we basically just have a lot of international relationships as well, which, as we'll touch on a bit later in this seminar, international relationships and partners are a huge part of the communications industry. It's very, very important to communicate overseas as it is domestically, and we think that the pandemic's had a big impact on that as well, which we'll touch on later. And basically we don't work in silos, and what we mean by that is we believe in integrated communications. We don't believe that one part of communications is more important than the other, and we'll always be prepared to challenge our customers and our clients if we disagree with the way that they think that they need to carry out a communications project. And I think that's a big part of the job, is challenging as much as it is sort of like reflecting and capitalizing. So that's a very quick speedy tour about what we do. Has anyone got any questions at this stage before is it the next slide, Danielle? Has anyone got any questions at this stage, or should we just carry on?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Laura.
So you may talk about this later on, but for the showcase, I'm actually the person doing all of the promoting. I've been running the social media, making the Eventbrites, and I'm also doing internal communications. I'm a dance student. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm just kind of thrown into it. So I was just wondering if you had any tips and tricks, for those just starting out into the world of communications, people like me who have been thrust into the role. Any initial thoughts on how to get started?
I mean, we have a whole section about it.
we actually are about to touch on that exact question, Laura. So if by the end of the next question we haven't answered your question, we'll go back and we'll answer it again. Do you want to skip on to the next slide and then we can answer Laura's question?
There we go. Why would a job in communications be for you? So that was the most beautiful segue ever. I don't think I could have even planned it that way. So when we were putting together this little seminar, me and Lydia had a great chat about this exact thing, about being in university and, you know, the skills that you're kind of in university. How do those transfer into the world of comms? How can you build the most beautiful cover letter known to man, like those kind of things. So what we did was we pulled together some of the skills that we're actually graded on as consultants. So when you start out at Lansons, you'll be, well, we had a role called the junior exec, but that doesn't exist anymore. It's just the account exec now. So from account exec to senior account exec, you're actually reviewed every 3 months, which is great. And we do 360 feedback as well. So you get to hear back from all your colleagues, and it's great. And they grade you on these different competencies. And so we've pulled some of them together into these blocks, these bubbles. And so I'll just kind of run through a few of them now. So I think in terms of our skill set, you have to be a great planner, organizer, multitasker. Agency life is very fast paced, and you are, you know, having a large number of clients means that you're going to be asked to do a lot of things at the same time, and you're going to have to kind of learn how to kind of prioritize things, and, you know, and make sure that you're kind of creating your own kind of workflow, because everybody works on different clients. So nobody has the exact same amount. Nobody works on the exact same clients that you do, because, you know, we split them out between us. So only you know how much work you have. So it's really, really important that you make sure that you're a great multitasker. And then, you know, you have to be a positive and proactive learner. And by that, I mean, ask questions. Like, the one thing is, when you join a company, you don't want to be that person that's like, oh my God, I don't want to ask too many questions. Never, don't worry about that. Throw that aside. Ask the questions that you need to know, because everybody is always happy to answer them. Nobody falls out the womb and knows communications. You know what I mean? Not even the CEOs of our company knew it from birth. So you're entitled to ask those questions, and we have systems set up for that. We have everybody, when you first join, you have a buddy, and you also have a career manager as well. So you have people that when you first join the agency, they'll be asked any question that you have. It's totally fine. So just think about that. And in terms of skills, you know, you got to be a great relationship builder, building relationships with clients, building it with journalists, you know, building it with stakeholders. It's really, really important that you know how to do that. It helps if you're a good public speaker. You know, if you do drama, or even if you're a law student or something random like that, if you have to do public speaking or presentations throughout your degree, that is all really, really great experience for this sort of thing as well. As I said, you've got to be a creative thinker. As I said, idea generation, so important. So it really helps if you kind of challenge your brain to think about that and think really outside of the box. It helps if you're a talented writer or a designer. We're always looking for really, really talented writers. You're writing a lot of press releases, you're writing media alerts, you're writing, you know, I draft a lot of blog content and stuff like that. So it really helps if you can do that, or if you're really good at, you know, Photoshop or whatever. It helps if you're a news or social media junkie. In fact, you know what, I should have circled that as the most important one, because being on top of the news cycle will make your job a million times easier. Because when you're talking to clients, they're gonna be talking about the things that are happening in their sector, in their industry. So it helps if you kind of know what they're talking about, so that you can have a meaningful dialogue. And then being a team player, obviously, super important. And then obviously being a natural networker as well. So yeah, those are the most important skills. So what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about a day in the life. We always get questions like this: what's a day in the life of an agency look like? And there's no way to answer that question, because every day is different, and that's what makes the job beautiful and also terrifying. So we're going to talk a little bit about why these skills are so important when you're thinking about, you know, the day-to-day work. So what I've tried to do is to try and simplify things. I've split them into the work that we do into 3 buckets. And I don't know if you can see it at the bottom there, but I'll tell you what it says at the bottom there. So I've split it into campaign creation, new business, and general consultancy at the end. So the first one that I'm talking about is campaign creation. As I said, ideas. When you work on the consumer side, you will be constantly asked to think about, you know, you're constantly in planning mode. You're thinking about creative ways that you can kind of push your product, push your service, and creating really impactful ways of actually engaging with your audience. And so it helps if you are researching. We do a lot of competitor audits on social media. You know, we're making sure that we don't duplicate other people's, you know, campaigns, making sure that they're really original, really fresh, really great. And so that's in terms of campaign creation. I've talked about the other skills, so I'll move on to the next bit. New business. Obviously, Lydia is going to be way more like qualified to talk about this section than I am, but I'll do my best. So when you're thinking about new business, the skills that are really important in this is being a promoter or an entrepreneur. We call it having a entrepreneurial spirit, and that's something that we kind of we'll touch into a little bit later, but it's just essentially being really positive about the business, finding ways to push it outside of kind of the general day-to-day work that you do in clients, being proactive, being, you know, again, a good public speaker. That helps if you're doing pitches and stuff like that. And then finally, talking about consultancy, and that is like the general day-to-day work, you know, making sure the account runs smoothly. Every account is different, and they have different set of commitments that you've agreed to in your contract. So it's making sure that you meet those, making sure you're having regular meetings and calls, that you're turning up on time, that you're problem solving. You know, if you know we're there as consultants, which means we actually have people will consult us about stuff. Kind of in the name. So, you know, if they have an issue, they will ask us about our opinion on things, and it's okay to not have all the answers. Like, I think one of the things that when that you kind of have anxiety about is, oh my gosh, if I'm on a client and they ask me something and I don't know the answer, you don't have to kind of wing it. You can ask other people. The great thing about being as an agency is that you pool your knowledge. So you reach out to the agency, you drop anyone a message. Does anybody, you know about this really niche part of this? Does anyone know this journalist really well? Does anyone have any information on this company? These are questions that people ask every single day, and it helps to always make sure that you reach out and ask other people. And as I said, relationship building, being adaptable, really, really important. So that's, have you got anything else to add, Lydia, on these?
No, I think you've covered it all off very well.
Right. And so now what we're going to do is look at the communications landscape right now and how we can access it a little bit better. And Lydia's going to talk us through that.
Yeah, so, and I think, yeah, Laura, this part of this section might also help you answer your question, but if we don't, again, just shout at us and we'll do our best. But basically, AFL Insight found that 72% of consumers actually believe that companies have a legal and not just a social responsibility to people and to the planet, which is an extraordinarily large number of consumers, people like you and I, thinking that, you know, we need to care about the planet and we need to action it as well as say that we're going to do it. So more and more companies are sort of shifting towards protecting both their employees and their customers and rolling out sustainable practices and doing it. And I think, you know, looking at the likes of Greta Thunberg and David Attenborough being key spokespeople in the sort of area of greener planet is a really good way of seeing like how important communications can be. And I think being environmentally friendly, socially conscious, is always going to help you reach your consumers if you show that and prove that you are sort of fulfilling those practices. So the communications industry, I'd argue, has had to adapt to fit into this sort of new way of thinking. And one way that it has had to adapt, certainly been spurred on by the pandemic, but it was definitely happening before, is to become more internationalized. As I mentioned earlier, building connections and networks overseas has never been so important. And I think, you know, being able to roll out Zoom and Teams across all different communications organizations has definitely exacerbated that and has helped people to build more connections. I think I find it easier to stay in contact with my friends that live abroad now because we've got Zoom and you can just chat on a Zoom link and it's all that easy. And I'm sure that it's been the same at universities. Everyone's been having seminars online like we're doing now. It's the same for the communications industry. It's made those connections stronger and easier and better than ever before. So that's sort of one way that the communications landscape is sort of looks like at the moment, and certainly a direction that it's going in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even just in terms of accessibility on a financial point, it's a lot cheaper. Like we used to go for a lot of lots of lunches and dinners and lots of traveling, and that adds up. So I think even just in terms of, you know, the price point, it's a lot cheaper to be a consultant right now. We're saving so much money. But the second point that we really wanted to touch on is the humanitarian part. And I feel like obviously as a result of the pandemic, companies and brands have had to show that they essentially have a heart. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like when we're in the midst of an economic, wow, I can't even pronounce that word, economic recession, it helps that you know, people want to ensure that the brands they're putting their money into care about them. That they're making charitable donations, that they're reaching out to vulnerable communities and doing outreach. All of these things have been exacerbated by COVID, and essentially they're going to be expected now from now on. I feel like we've raised the bar. So now that we've proven that we can do this kind of work regularly, it's not just like, oh, well, once things go back to normal, we can stop that. No, it's now become the standard, and we have to reach that standard always. So I think that's something that we should always remember. And so moving on to that, we wanted to talk a little bit about, oh, sorry. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, I think that's the right slide.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, and going back to your question earlier, Laura, these sorts of interests and enthusiasms will definitely help you start out in the world of communications. You know, be it interest in business strategy, having a sort of entrepreneurial spirit, being enthusiastic, caring about what's going on in the world, engaging in the media, be it, you know, the Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail, or social media, seeing what people are saying on Facebook, just being engaged as much as you can. And I think that will help you in any sort of learning or professional development in whatever industry you choose to go into. I think definitely trying to build connections in those areas, build relationships. I mean, if any of you guys are interested in starting out a job in communications, myself and Danielle, we've left our emails at the end of the seminar, so feel free to contact us. I think it's all about starting out with using those connections and capitalizing on it, really. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say on that slide. Danielle, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of social media as well, add us on LinkedIn. Like, those platforms are increasingly so much more important, especially in the world of comms. It's how you get seen. I've had so many opportunities given to me via LinkedIn. It's so important. So if you haven't got a LinkedIn page, get one. So the next bit, how can you get your foot in the door?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're all online at the moment. Hopefully this won't be forever that we're doing everything online, but sort of 3 to 6 months relevant experience in any sort of communications type of job would definitely be beneficial. If this sounded like the role for you, it would definitely give you the confidence that you need to sort of start in a job in comms. I think you can gain that from work experience, placements, internship roles, working in a junior position, even at uni. I know I did a bit of PR management for an event at university, and it really helped me just understand certain terms and the way that the media worked, actually. So, and it was just a couple of months outside my degree. So anything like that is always going to be really, really beneficial to you. And definitely transferable. So, and we mentioned social media earlier. I think social media is so important for people who are starting out. I think using social media, but having a critical eye. Don't just sort of accept what you see on social media as a fact. I mean, again, I'm sure you're doing it at university all the time. You're always asked to question. And encouraged to question and not just accept. You can do that with social media and think, why does this work? Why is this a trend? Why am I engaging in this so much? I think doing that will definitely help you and help that build that entrepreneurial spirit that you need to start out in any job really. Danielle, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I completely agree with your point. I think when you're thinking about work experience placements, it can be such a difficult process. You know, you email a million companies and half of them don't get back to you. And then you're thinking about, oh gosh, what do I do now? And I think what you've got to do is be really proactive. You know, as Lydia says, if you are somebody who, you know, has a friend that has a business, or you've got a promo of an event like Laura is, you know, all of that counts as experience. So always use it in your cover letters, in your interviews. It's all great stuff, and it shows that kind of entrepreneurial spirit that we were talking about. So always never think that, oh, because I haven't worked at whatever big company, that I haven't got proper work experience. Comms experience comes in all shapes and sizes. So use what you got.
And I've just seen on the side that John has asked a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry. No, as you were talking, I was about to bring attention to that. Sorry about that. Right, go on.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not actually as good as at Zoom as I should be, so I only just noticed that. I apologise. But yeah, do Lansons offer internships? Yes, we offer work experience, and I've left a link to an email address just there. So feel free to get in touch via that email address, and or likewise, myself and Danielle have our email addresses at the end of this seminar, so feel free to ask us there. And then your first question, I don't know, Danielle, whether or not you had any initial thoughts to John's first question. Have you got that up?
I haven't, because I'm screen sharing. Could you read it for me?
So is there a conflict between your work for decolonialization and internationalization? I'm not 100% certain I understand. I don't know if you could elaborate a little.
Yeah, I kind of understand what he means by that. So essentially, I'll be honest, I mainly work on the decolonization side. So in terms of the internet, wow, I can't even pronounce that word, but you know what word I mean, internationalization. I understand. So essentially, the work that we work on is very much in the crisis sphere. So obviously, as a result of the pandemic, there's been a kind of a real focus on that. In terms of statues and that sort of thing, and you know, do they have a right in our public spaces, and you know, places like the British Museum and all the kind of major arts and heritage organizations are looking at themselves and thinking about, okay, you know, what can we do to make our spaces more inclusive, to make the work that we do more inclusive. And I think that this is a really, really important piece of work. It's not going anywhere. It's even speeding up. I do a weekly roundup for one of my clients every Friday, and it takes me 2 hours to pull together, and it is lengthy because I pull out every single thing that everybody is doing, and it's crazy to watch that kind of work take place. And in terms of the I can never pronounce that, internationalization sphere, I think it's something that we balance out, and I think, but from my perspective, it's quite siloed for me because I don't really do much work in terms of the internationalization sphere. I feel like that's probably more Lydia's bucket, but it's definitely something we think about as an agency, and we definitely always are pushing our clients to do better, to make better decisions, to make commitments that are actually, you know, very, very inclusive, and thinking about, okay, how can we challenge ourselves? We're always challenging our clients. I think that's so important as a consultant. You know, if you're not challenging them, then what are you actually there for? Because if we don't do it, then the media or the general public are going to do it. So we need to do it first, essentially.
Yeah, and I think just to follow up, I think you answered that really well, Danielle. I think just to follow up on that as well, you can't have one without the other. So you can't really have really, really successful sort of domestic communication without having being able to communicate overseas, because the world we live in we are so globalized as a world, and you know, Teams and Zoom makes that even easier for us to do so, and social media. So and
also, we're an international agency. We have offices in New York and in the UK, in London. So you know, even if we're not greatly clued up on how another market or another country would react to a campaign or a piece of work we're doing, we can consult our colleagues from across the states to find out and get their views on it. And so it's an integrated piece of work, I think, especially when we're thinking about these particular clients. So it's something to always bear in mind, but we're always having a general conversation. We're always trying to make sure that essentially we give them the right advice. So yeah.
Just a bit conscious of time, we've only got 20 minutes, so we better rattle through
the next bit.
The next section, which is more, we were basically just thinking of ways to to sort of show what communications does in society, the sort of role it plays, what it looks like. We've talked a lot about sort of laterally what it is, how we do it, how you can do it if you want to do it, but we wanted to sort of make it a bit more sort of colourful, add colour to it as an industry.
Yeah.
So Danielle, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, so one of the we outlined 3 themes in the title of our event, and one of them is purpose. And so, as we've kind of touched upon, it's become increasingly more important to consumers that, you know, the brands and the companies that we interact with have a social purpose, have some way of interacting with society and doing the right thing, essentially. And over the past year, society has been pushed to review its relationship with so many different issues, but environment is obviously a very, very big one. And in the corporate and comm sphere, we're looking at not just in the environment, but we're looking at social issues, and we're looking at governance. And we call this focus ESG. It's a term that you might have heard being flung around and not really sure what it means. And essentially, it talks about the environmental side, the social, socially conscious social issues, and then governance. And so what it does, it encapsulates the commitments that brands are making in order to, for instance, cut their carbon output, their plastic use, greener transport, carbon offsetting, that sort of thing, and investment in non-eco-friendly funds or companies. It also zeroes in on community outreach and improving the lives of those who are vulnerable. And then finally, it's examining what corporate boards are doing and what they look like in terms of their gender split, in terms of racial bias, in terms of and then looking at how they treat their employees in terms of employee welfare. If you've heard about the stories at the Amazon and things like that, about customer care, how are they running the business? And so purpose in ESG is something that as a business, Lansons is really, really dedicated to pushing our clients on and ensuring that they make good decisions in this space. And so what we've done at the bottom here of the 3 trends that we're going to talk about is we've pulled out 2 different brands, and one of them are the heroes and one of the villains. So essentially, brands that are doing really well in this space and brands that are not doing so well. And so for our villain, we actually have Shell, which is a petrol company. And essentially, they were recently pulled up by the Dutch government and the Dutch courts, and they were told that they need to cut their carbon emissions by 45% over the next decade. And obviously, this is something that has shaken the entire oil and gas industry, because they're thinking, oh my gosh, if it's happening to them, then it could happen to us. And so when we're thinking about stuff like this, we need to make sure that if we were representing Shell, which we don't, we would, advise them to put out a list of commitments about how they're going to reach their targets by the time, and make sure that they hit them. That's the only way that, that you can make sure that you can handle something like this. You can't just be like, okay, they've told us that we need to hit it, and then not say anything or do anything, because then it looks like we're not taking it very seriously. And so that's why we've kind of outlined them as a villain. In terms of our heroes, a client that we actually do work with is LV General Insurance. And so over the last couple of years, we helped them launch an insurance product for electric vehicles. If you didn't know, the UK government has outlined that essentially you will not be able to buy a petrol or diesel car after 2030. So essentially, and I think they've even talked about bringing it back to 2025. But essentially, that means that we're all going to have to make the transition to driving electric vehicles. And so what they've done as part of that, it's not just pushing their own product. They've been lobbying with the government to make sure that they actually put money into the charging network infrastructure, all of these really, really important things, trying to make electric vehicles more affordable for the general public, because they, at the moment, they are very, very expensive. And it's things like that that make them a hero in this space. The fact that they are not just saying, okay, we've got a product, we're going to push that. It's how do we actually change society? How do we push the government in making sure that this actually happens, that this transition is smooth and that it takes place? So that's what we've got for purpose. Has anyone got any questions on that? Or Lydia, have you got anything else before we move on to the next section?
Well, no, I mean, I was just going to add quickly, and again, we've only got 15 minutes, so I'll be quick, but a proof point to really show how important communication is in our daily lives, and the impact that ESG has had on the likes of Shell, is that oil price, obviously a commodity, has gone up as a result of pressure of ESG, which has obviously been communicated by a lot of different organizations. So it just really shows the power that communication can have in terms of prices of a commodity such as oil, and the impact that has on you and I's daily lives when we're filling up our cars. So the next theme that I better rattle through here is technology. A quarter of 11 to 14-year-olds sort of consider themselves to be influential on technology. Kantar, which is a research agency, their latest youth TGI data has shown that amongst sort of 11 to 14-year-olds, over 20% of them say that they speak to lots of different people about technology, be it computers, tablets, smartphones, whilst actually 25% believe that they could actually convince others with their views on those tech items, which is really interesting. I don't know about everyone else here, but I've certainly had to convince my mum and my dad to be better at using technology in order, if they want to actually survive in this world. And e-commerce, sort of payments online, has definitely gone up as a result of the pandemic. It was definitely going up before the pandemic. We can see that people are spending a lot more time purchasing things online. It's going to influence the way companies do business. WorldPay, who is the organization behind all contactless payments, basically, they found that 7% of UK shop payments are predicted to actually be cash by 2024 in a report that they published just this week. So it just shows the direction that companies are going in. It's towards technology. And who are the heroes and the villains in this space? It's obviously up to debate. I think that Klarna has had a bit of a tricky time. Obviously, the overall aim of technology companies is to make lives easier for their consumers and their customers. Klarna, you might be familiar with them, that they're a buy now, pay later company who work with the likes of ASOS or JD Sports, Office, and they have a really exciting story and a really exciting message, but unfortunately they've been at the forefront of a lot of criticism around their sort of advertising and their regulation, and it's put a lot of customers off. It's also put influencers off working with them. It's had a lot of reputational sort of impact on the company, to the point that sort of overall brand love for Klarna has declined this year. It's gone down by over 4% at the beginning of this year. So it's a tricky one for communications professionals to navigate, but I think overall, they have a role to sort of change the way not just Klarna communicate, but the way that they actually do their business. And it just really shows that it's not just about perception, it's about action as well. And then Spotify, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. I'm a big fan. I'm an avid user. It's sort of reality and its behavior. They both tick both boxes for me. I think it's reputational. It's a trusted company. It does a lot of work for brands, as well as insight sharing. Its customers are able to sort of track what they're listening to. It's very, very targeted, and I think this has been really successful for the company. I don't know if you guys were familiar with when Spotify first sort of kicked off. There was a lot of conversation around brands and whether or not brands and bands are being paid well enough. That conversation has moved on. Completely. And I would argue that it's the role of communication has had in navigating that field. We don't so much talk about, oh, well, brands aren't being paid enough. A lot of them who initially spoke out and criticised Spotify now actually have their music on Spotify because it's a very targeted and powerful organisation. And I think they've been quite good at navigating their sort of communications targets and strategy. So yeah, I think we've only got 10 minutes. So Danielle, if you want to move on to the next slide, so we've got time for questions at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the final bit that we're going to talk about is diversity and equality. And obviously, due to the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless other others in the US, hundreds of Black Lives Matter protests were launched across the globe. And we watched hundreds of brands post black squares or put out statements to show solidarity. And what we found is that the corporate industry's historically lukewarm attitude towards diversity and equality was kind of pulled into a really razor sharp focus. In fact, a 2018 survey covering about 35 countries shows that 64% of consumers would reward firms which they saw as engaged in some kind of brand activism. However, many brands still really struggle to meaningfully connect with either LGBTQ or Black or brown consumers. And as consultants, we must continue to advise our clients to think really holistically about their approach to diversity. So for instance, it can't just be that, you know, we have a really diverse advert, or, you know, if they're a fashion brand that, you know, that the models are diverse. It has to go all the way through, all the way up towards their board level. We have to make sure that we're making those kind of commitments, because increasingly the media is examining those employee and those board member demographics to ensure that they reflect modern society, and that significant charitable donations, projects, or outreach are made to those vulnerable communities that they do impact. So it's something that's really, really important. It's always on our radar now and has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And it's something that, obviously, especially from me in being a co-founder of the Diversity Project, working on with crisis clients, it's something that I'm really, really pushing my clients to be really, really thoughtful about, and to make sure that they're not just having a really pretty or beautiful statement that kind of says all the right things, but that they are committing to real change that will impact those communities in a positive way. And so for the heroes and villains, I'll quickly run through. We have Nike as our hero. Nike have actually been, you know, in terms of the if there was a curve of Black Lives Matter, they were on it really early. Black Lives Matter was, if you don't know, it was a movement started by 4 Black queer women in 2016 after the death of Michael Brown. And at the time, not a lot of corporate brands identified with it. Not a lot of even the media, they didn't identify with it at all. And then obviously over the last year, it's seen a huge surge in support. And Nike have been kind of on that curve from very, very early on. They were one of the only brands that really, really aligned themselves with it very, very early on. And so when, you know, after the death of George Floyd, they put out a statement and they were challenged because they were asked, well, you know, if you're so all about Black Lives Matter, then how come only 10% of your, you know, 300 vice presidents across the globe are Black? And, you know, they came back and they were really, really honest about it, and they said, you know what, look, you're right, that's not right, we're gonna change the way we practice, we're gonna make sure that we're hiring more diversely, and also we're going to put $40 million into Black communities, into supporting those into initiatives that's, you know, that impact Black communities in the US. So I think those kind of things show that they're a real hero, and that they're taking on the criticism that they're getting and they're actually working on it. And then the second one that we wanted to pull out is L'Oreal. And I'll quickly go into that. So again, they kind of jumped on the bandwagon, putting out a statement that they, you know, align with Black Lives Matter. And then essentially a very popular Black transgender model called Monroe Bergdorf who was previously an ambassador for L'Oreal, was actually fired for statements that she made in support of Black Lives Matter. And so that came up, and essentially everyone was like, you guys look like huge hypocrites. And L'Oreal had to put out an apology towards Monroe, and eventually I think she's now actually been reinstated as one of their ambassadors. But it's things like that really challenge us in the comm space to make sure that when we are thinking about socially conscious movements, that we look at the history of the brand, we look at the decisions that they've made, we look at the commitments that they've made, and we make sure that they align completely, because that's how you miss out things like that, huge things like that. And so that's what we've pulled together for this slide, and it's something that obviously is hugely important if you're joining the common space to kind of be up on. And I think that's all of the actual themes that we had, and we wanted to thank you guys for obviously joining us. And now we'll take questions. We've obviously got our emails addresses here, and we think we've got 5 minutes for questions if you guys have any for us.
Go ahead.
Thank you both for that very, very informative presentations. It's been fantastic. I actually had a question because I'm also quite interested in going to PR and communications. And I was looking at masters because obviously my degree, photography, isn't that related. Would you recommend taking an educational sort of route as well as work experience, or do you believe that sort of work experience and that sort of like real world experience is more important than like education? What are your sort of opinions on that?
I would say that it's obviously entirely up to you. I found that the world of communications, there's a lot of learning on the job, and it's not for me anyway, you can go down lots of different avenues to get into the sphere, and I must say I don't have the experience of having done a master's in it, but I do know that you will be able to, if you ask the right questions and you speak to the right people and you have any work experience, be it unpaid, you'll have as good opportunities. You'll be faced with as good opportunities as I think if you were to get to do a master's in it. I would definitely be championing learning on the job. I don't know, Danielle, if you'd agree or disagree with that.
I completely agree. I definitely didn't do a master's in comms. I did English and drama, so completely left field. And I kind of started out doing my own PR campaign targeted at Black female artists, because I do a bit of music PR on the side. So that's how I started out, and I kind of built that up from the ground up and then used that as a way in. So I think that really and truly, I don't think you need to do that. I mean, if you want to do it and it's something that's really, really important to you, and you really want to have that knowledge, that background knowledge, then go for it. But I don't think you absolutely need to. And I think there's so many other avenues as well. Like I took online SEO courses, I did so many other things, and even in photography, there's so many great skills that you'll be able to transfer over, like just in terms of designing and just having that kind of ideas about what a campaign should look like, what all that kind of stuff is so useful. And so any agency would be lucky to have you. So I wouldn't necessarily say you need to, but if you want to, go for it.
Yeah, I definitely say with a degree like photography as well, you'll find that there might be some crossover, and you'll probably find that you actually know a lot more than you think you do. I did politics, and I didn't think that I would know anything about communications, but so many of the skills that we use on a daily basis, time management, having a critical eye, being creative, all of those things that we talked about earlier, they'll all be more than beneficial to you if you want to start out in comms. So yeah. Has anyone else got any other questions or anything else to add?
Go for it, Laura.
Sorry, I'm full of questions today. So when you were talking about things like the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, those sorts of things, like I don't know a lot about communication, so I would have always thought that companies would have almost had to have a neutrality towards them. But obviously maybe that's not the case. So I just wanted to know, like, if you had any more information on when it's more important to be neutral to a cause than it is to be proactive towards a cause.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift with both Me Too and Black Lives Matter, I think they've both been kind of pulled into focus. I think there was a time when most comms professionals would say, okay, we're going to take a neutral stand on this. We're not going to comment. We're not going to be pulled into it. But I think over the last year, it was expected. Consumers were demanding that brands actually talk about it. And so when you've got that kind of pressure, it makes it really difficult as a comms professional to be like, we're not going to say anything, because then if you're getting dragged for not saying anything, it could be just as worse.
Well, I thought about it when Diversity did their piece on the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
ITV released their statement. I was kind of taken back by it, thinking, oh, I would have thought they would just been like,
we're not going to say anything.
And I was quite impressed that they'd stood up for them.
Yeah, a good way of thinking about it is would, you know, the brands that you use on a daily basis, what would you think about them if they didn't have an opinion on something that was such a big issue? Would that make you refrain from using that brand, or would you just think, oh, do you know what, it's fine, it doesn't matter? So I think that's the sort of direction that a lot of companies have had to take as a result of such a global issue and such an important one. I think that we're moving away from no comment. I think.
Yeah. And I think it's generational as well. I think 10, 15 years ago, with the generation, it was very conservative. You didn't want to kind of rock the boat. It was very safe. They played it very, very safe. And I think we're in a completely different sphere now, where the younger generation, Gen Zs, millennials, are expecting people to have those conversations and are challenging brands to have those conversations. Being silent is, again, being violent, being complicit in a lot of public sphere's opinion. So you kind of don't want to be a part of that. You kind of want to be able to make sure that you can take a stand and that you can be on the right side of history or whatever it is. So I think that's why brands have really had that kind of shift and thinking, okay, no, we actually do have to have a real conversation about this now. Anyone else got questions? Even though we're like
1 minute over, I think.
But if anyone's got any burning questions, let us know. Or if you think of any, jot down our emails and shoot us a message, or the careers@lansons.com people as well. And we'll be happy to answer anything. If you've got any more kind of burning thoughts about this. But it's been great having you guys. We've been so happy.
And thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been so fun. Like Emma reads on this. Have you taken a screenshot? Because I have not, and I want to take a little screenshot for our socials, for our time that we've spent together. Oh,
it's been great.
Lydia, let me see if I can take one. Oh Lord. I don't even know how to. It's like when you're under pressure, you don't even know how to use it. You got one? Okay, great. We've got one. We're good, guys.
I've got one, Danielle.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.